Ever feel like science is straight out of sci-fi?
Totally.
We're diving into a study today that kind of blurs those lines.
Oh, yeah.
Get this. Scientists implanted bacteria into other cells
Wow.
to recreate how simple organisms might have joined forces to become, well, us.
It's wild, this whole idea of endosymbiosis, right?
Endosymbiosis.
Yeah, where one organism lives inside another,
Okay, so like a super tiny roommate situation.
basically. And it's more common than you might think. But this study, it gives us a glimpse into how that might have happened way back when, like with the very first complex cells.
So how do they actually do this? It sounds incredibly difficult.
Oh, it was. They used a nano-sized needle to inject bacteria into a type of fungus. It's like threading a microscopic needle.
Seriously. And I heard a rumor about a bicycle pump being involved.
Well, it actually ended up being an air compressor.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah, fungal cells are tough cookies, thick walls, high pressure inside. So getting that bacteria in, it's like trying to inflate a tire. They needed that extra oomph.
Talk about hardcore cellular strength training.
Right.
But why this particular fungus and bacteria? Did they just pick them out of a hat?
Not at all. They chose this pair. It was Rhizopus microsporus, that's the fungus, and Mycetohabitans rhizosenica, the bacteria, because they have this really cool relationship in nature. They actually already depend on each other.
So they're like a known power couple in the natural world.
Exactly. The bacteria produce a toxin, and get this, it actually helps protect the fungus.
Look, so it's like a toxic but beneficial relationship.
Exactly. And that's what made them perfect for this study.
Yeah.
The scientists wanted to recreate that kind of long-term cohabitation in the lab.
Okay, so they managed to get this bacteria inside the fungus. What happened next? Did they just live happily ever after on a cellular level?
Well, the big question was, would it last?
Yeah.
Could it be passed down?
Oh, like a hereditary roommate situation.
Exactly. And amazingly, some of those fungi started producing spores.
Spores.
Yeah, like their offspring, and the spores already had the bacteria inside.
Whoa. So they basically gave their kids a built-in bacterial buddy, right from the start.
Precisely. They created a heritable trait.
Wow.
And this is huge because it shows these kinds of relationships, which we think led to things like mitochondria, weren't just a one-time fluke. They could actually stick around, over a long period.
Okay, now, mitochondria, those are the little energy factories in our cells, right? It's been a while since high school biology.
That's right. And the theory is they were once free-living bacteria that got engulfed by another cell billions of years ago.
So, this experiment gives us a potential model for how that first step might have happened.
Exactly. It's like a little window into the past.
But I read that not all of the spores survived this whole process, right? The success rate wasn't that great at first.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of the spores with the bacteria just wouldn't germinate.
So what did they do?
They had to play Mother Nature a little bit, mimic natural selection in the lab.
Okay.
They used this really cool tool called a fluorescent cell sorter. So they tagged the bacteria with a protein that glows, and it allowed them to separate out the spores that had inherited those glowing bacteria.
Oh, that's so cool.
Land.
It's like a cosmic game show. Only the spores with the right bacteria get to move on to the next round.
Exactly. And by the 10th generation, they had a much more stable situation.
Yeah.
Almost all the spores were germinating successfully, just like their ancestors that didn't have the added bacteria.
So they've got these fungi, now they're cohabitating with the bacteria, they're passing it down. But why did it work? What changed to make this arrangement so successful?
That is the million-dollar question. To figure it out, they had to look at the genomes, the instruction manuals of both the fungus and the bacteria.
Okay, what did those manuals say?
Well, what they found was pretty surprising.
Don't leave us hanging. What was the big reveal?
The bacteria, they remained genetically unchanged.
Okay.
But the fungus had undergone several mutations in its DNA.
Hold on. So the fungus basically rearranged its entire genetic living room just to accommodate this bacteria, and the bacteria didn't have to lift a finger.
It's like, the fungus is the one who had to make all the compromises in the relationship, right?
Right. It's like the fungus was playing a cellular version of the real world, and only the most adaptable roommates got to stay on the show.
Exactly. But now the question is, why were those mutations so beneficial, right? Did they somehow make it easier for the fungus to actually use that toxin the bacteria was making? Or maybe they helped, regulate the relationship somehow so the bacteria wouldn't end up taking over completely,
Yeah, so many questions, and this is all happening on such a tiny scale, it's mind-blowing. But you mentioned earlier that this research could have huge implications, right? For the future. How does this fungus bacteria love story?
Right.
How does it translate into something that could help us, like, I don't know, solve climate change or something?
Well, I don't know about solving it, but it definitely has potential.
Oh,
This experiment gives us a model system to understand how to engineer these kinds of partnerships, these symbiotic relationships, for all sorts of applications.
okay, so paint me a picture. What's the most optimistic scenario here? Like, way down the line, what could this lead to?
Well, imagine, engineering organisms that could like break down pollutants or
Yeah.
like produce biofuels way more efficiently,
Okay.
or even help us develop new medicines. Or we could design crops that can just pull nitrogen right out of the air.
Mm.
Can you imagine?
Wow, that's amazing. So instead of fighting against nature, we could work with it to solve some of these big problems.
Exactly. Nature's been doing this for billions of years. We're just starting to, scratch the surface of what's possible.
That's so cool. But I do have to play devil's advocate for a second, right? Some people might say, okay, this is just a lab experiment. How do we know this is how it really happened billions of years ago?
Right, right.
Like,
Yeah.
we can't exactly hop into a time machine and watch those early cells doing their thing.
Huh. No, unfortunately not. But we can look for clues, in the world around us, and there's a ton of evidence that supports this whole endosymbiosis idea.
Yeah.
One of the biggest ones is like the structure of mitochondria themselves.
Okay, remind me, what's so special about mitochondria again?
Well, mitochondria, those little energy factories, they actually have their own DNA.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's totally separate from the cell's main DNA, which is stored in the nucleus.
So it's like they have their own little set of instructions, like a mini instruction manual inside the bigger instruction manual of our cells.
Exactly. A perfect way to put it. And get this, the DNA in mitochondria, it's incredibly similar to the DNA we find in certain bacteria.
No way. So it's like the mitochondria in our cells are like these tiny little time capsules carrying this like ancient bacterial legacy inside them.
Exactly. And it's not just the DNA, the way they divide, their size, their shape, it all points to them having once been free-living bacteria.
It's like those Russian nesting dolls, but with like cells, inside cells, each layer telling a story about the history of life on Earth.
I love that analogy. And, the more we learn, the more we realize that life is this incredibly complex tapestry,
Yeah.
right? All woven together over billions of years.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. So we've got this fascinating experiment. We've got genetic clues hidden inside our very cells. But you keep mentioning the future. What are some of the, like, hurdles we need to overcome to actually use this knowledge, to make those pollution-eating plants a reality?
It's super exciting, isn't it? But you're right. It's not just as simple as, like, snapping our fingers. One of the biggest challenges is just the sheer complexity of biology,
I bet. I mean, it's not like building something out of Legos.
You'd be surprised. Even though we're getting really good at genetic engineering, cells are incredibly intricate, and they're dynamic, always changing. Even the smallest change can have these ripple effects that we just don't anticipate.
So it's like we're dealing with this incredibly delicate balancing act.
Yeah, and that's why we have to be incredibly careful, right?
Right. We don't want to create some kind of super fungus while trying to, like, save the planet.
Exactly. Safety is huge, obviously, and control. Like really understanding the potential consequences before we start messing with these systems out in the real world.
It's a lot of responsibility for sure. It makes you think, what if, we discover something amazing, something that could really change everything, but it comes with these risks we can't even imagine yet? How do we even begin to make those decisions?
Well, that's where it becomes important to have these open conversations, right?
Yeah.
And it can't just be scientists, It has to be policymakers, ethicists, the public, everyone, really. We have to talk about this now before it's too late, before these technologies are so advanced that we don't have time to consider the consequences.
It's a lot to think about. I mean, this whole deep dive has been amazing. We've gone from injecting bacteria into fungi with tiny needles to, like, pondering the future of life on Earth.
It really shows you the power of scientific curiosity.
Mhm.
This one experiment, it all started with this natural phenomenon, and it's opened up so many new questions, so many possibilities.
It's true. Like, what other incredible partnerships are out there just waiting to be discovered, hidden within these tiny organisms doing all this incredible stuff?
There's so much we still don't know. Every new discovery is like a reminder that, the natural world is full of surprises.
Yeah.
We're still figuring it all out. Our understanding of life is always evolving.
That's what makes it so exciting. This is really just the beginning of our journey into this incredible world of symbiosis. But for now, we've reached the end of our deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep exploring, keep asking those questions. Who knows, maybe you'll be the one to make the next big discovery.
That's right. Until next time, keep those minds curious, and thanks for joining us on the deep dive.